Hi, my name is John Swearingen Jr. and I'm the director of the Museum of Fulton County. And today I'm going to take you on a walk through our temporary exhibit called Women Working for Changes. This was designed in 2020 for the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage, and we'll be talking about the 100 years in Fulton County before the right to vote. What we now think of as non-traditional roles for women have been around since the founding of Fulton County, just not always recorded in history books. How did women's roles change from President Madison's era of good feelings to President Wilson's endorsement of the 19th Amendment? In 1822, Caleb Atwater convinced the governor of Ohio and legislators to study the creation of a state educational system, which it did in 1825. Oberlin College in Ohio in 1835 and nearby Hillsdale College in Michigan in 1845 were the two co-ed institutions preparing future, what was then Henry County teachers of the time period. Women not only taught children in one-room schools, but whole families of American Indians. Laura Smith Haviland in Adrian, Michigan, even started the River Raisin Valley Institute, the first in our area to have racially mixed students. Girls as young as 15 could be assigned to teach at a Fulton County Township one-room school. Depending on their reading, writing, and arithmetic abilities, the first level of classes could contain students older than the teacher, or as young as 6. If her parents did not live near her place of employment, female teachers could be housed in the homes of their pupils. Our first mannequin for the 1830s section is borrowed from the Wolcott House in Maumee, Ohio, and she is dressed with a traditional hairstyle with the long billowing curls that come down with her hair parted in the middle. And the chemise that you see to her right, your left, is from Polly Ayers Hayes Reed. This was a lady from Wausean. She originally was from New York when she was teaching school after her first husband died. And it's quite a unique story. You can see here in the permanent exhibit that Polly Ayers married Edwin Hayes' father, and he passed away during the time when they were living in New York. He was a sheriff at the time. Suddenly died, left her with these two sons to raise by herself. So she became a school teacher at the Presbyterian Mission School for the Seneca living in that town. And you could see our Presbyterian Mission in the photograph on the upper left-hand corner near the Maumee River. So this hymnal is written in the Seneca language, and it has a lot of Christian hymns in it, which she would have been teaching to the natives. Our next section of the exhibit is from the 1840s. The success of an 1840s Lucas County farm required women to multitask beyond housework. With no one around for miles, a farm wife could often be found doing hard labor in the fields in her underpinnings, which is what we're showing here, while her eldest child would be left at home to tend to siblings and make meals. Lavinia Clement Butler was the first bride of her township and was not afraid to use a rifle, especially when English sparrows feasted in her cherry trees. Lavinia Butler's bonnet, chemise, and even her pantaloons are all provided to us from the Wolcott House as well. This jewelry you see in our permanent exhibit is Lavinia's jewelry that she wore. She was an anti-saloon league member, and we're showing a bottle of beer to the right and a bottle of soda. And this is to show that after Prohibition, the factory that made beer in Archbold switched from beer to soda. For the 1850s section of the exhibit, we are inside of a nursery, and our nanny here is Emma Bard. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 allowed slave catchers to remove runaways from anywhere in the United States. Enraged social reformers here in Fulton County helped from the Republican Party. Emma Bard, an enslaved nanny on a Kentucky plantation, moved to Fulton County after the passage of the 13th Amendment. The Bards owned their own farm, and Emma became a servant or cook to Mary Blackwell Howard in Winnipeg. In the 20th century, she owned her own laundry service. Emma's silk-plaid dress that you see is also on loan to us from the Wolcott house, including her cap. This is our permanent exhibit on Emma Bard, and you can see here a photograph of her in the middle when she was older in life. This is a photograph of Abraham Lincoln standing next to her, and her husband Frank Bard is down in the foreground of this display case. And in the back you can see a map of Pike Township where their church and home was. Our 1860 section is next, and we have a nurse. The Civil War brought out the worst and the best in people. Ellen Dudley, who we're showing here, had no experience, but she volunteered to be a Confederate nurse in Kentucky. A Union capture of her hospital changed her life forever. She began helping to heal soldiers from Ohio and fell in love with Martin Baxter from the tiny village of Raker in Fulton County. After the war, the U.S. government granted her a full Union pension for her work as a nurse. Here in the permanent exhibit you can see some examples of what women were doing during the Civil War. Ellen was a nurse, of course, but we also had women in the Christian Commission sending books, prayer books, and hymnals to the soldiers. And we had women sewing banners and flags for the war effort, and we had the creation of the Women's Relief Corps. Here in the 1870s, we're backstage at the Opera House in Fayette. An illegitimate child of John Ginnivan, Norma Miranda became the actress, married a fellow performer at the age of 16, became a widow, then divorced her second husband before 1880. In the days of male-dominated businesses, Norma defied all odds and worked her way up the ladder of success. She became a theatrical director and then owned her own dramatic company that toured every year from Fayette, Ohio, in the early days of vaudeville. And here in the permanent exhibit you can see some examples of opera houses in Fulton County, including the Ginnivan Dramatic Show sign in the very back. Here in 1880, we're in the home of a patient, and a doctor making a house call is a woman. Belleva Lockwood became the first woman to try a case before the Supreme Court in 1879, and in Wausean, Esther Stone became the first female telegrapher. Roxy Bates from Lyons, Mary Allen Wood from Delta, and Florence Waddle of Wausean became physicians. Florence was a member of the Homeopathic Medical Society of Ohio. Reverend Nellie Applegate preached at a church of the Nazarene in Wausean. Here in the display are some examples of the equipment that Florence would have used as a doctor. And notice the photograph of the people on the left side of the screen from the University of Michigan alumni, and there's a woman in the very middle of the photograph. Here in the permanent exhibit, you can see a photograph at the bottom next to the telegraphy equipment of Esther Stone, and the little statue with the little boy and the goat at the upper corner is the first thing she purchased with her first paycheck. Here in 1890, we're in a local dry goods store. Even in biblical times, women who owned their own business gained power in their communities. By the 1890s, being married, having a family, and owning a business in Fulton County became less taboo. Abigail Hull, who we see here, ran a thriving dry goods store in Wausean, Ohio, and was a member of the growing Wausean Businesswomen's Association. Many of these women-only meetings discussed temperance and suffrage issues secretly. The quilts you see here show some examples of women that we know were in the women's business group. And here you can see in this display case the actual dry goods items from Mrs. Hull's store. Here in 1900, we are in an office. Business schools, like the normal schools in Fayette and Wausean, opened doors of opportunity for women to start careers in offices and communications fields. Mary Downs was one of Fulton County's first telephone operators. Marjorie Whiteman surprised everyone with the announcement that she was going to attend law school. Many men complained loudly that women were taking these jobs from male family providers. The quilt you see in this display is made from silks that were inside women's cigarette containers. And this quilt pattern shows the drunkard's path, which was something that the Temperance Society would have used to promote sobriety. The connection between women trying to stop alcohol consumption and striving for the right to vote may not seem obvious, but both types of societal reform were critically connected. Anti-suffrage men who enjoyed alcohol feared that voting women would soon close breweries and distilleries. This purple plate from the collection is of Frances Willard, and she was an instrumental woman in the suffrage movement. In 1910, we are at the courthouse steps in Fulton County. In Ohio, the right to vote for women became an issue well before the passage of the 19th Amendment. Some Fulton County women from the Temperance Union and other ladies' groups were instrumental in a protest at Wausean's courthouse, wearing banners of purple, white, and gold, the colors of the National Women's Party, accompanied by 36 stars, states in the organization. Ohio ratified the 19th Amendment on June 16, 1919. Our 1929 Model A Ford was loaned to us from Ed Godostik, and it is decorated with sunflowers because that was the symbol of the women's movement. And the quilt behind the car, his design is called Sister's Choice, and it's a secret symbol for the suffrage movement. And our last section of the exhibit from the 1920s is a recreation of a World War II display window in downtown Wausean. We have old photographs that we use to reproduce this. As with past conflicts, the War to End All Wars saw women involved, behind the scenes at home and overseas, and in field hospitals and in offices. The newly created Red Cross chapter in Fulton County recruited citizens to join the forces to help the war effort and during the disasters at home. Armistice Day on 11/11/1919 became an end to one battle, and following August 18th was the end of women's suffrage battle. Our Lady Liberty here with her Marseille wave is flanked on either side by a Red Cross nurse and one of the Red Cross donuts providers during World War I. So I hope you enjoyed the exhibit and look forward to the next 100 years of progress for women. Thank you, and please come back again to see our next exhibit.